The Miami Dolphins reportedly have a new addition to their coaching staff in Bobby Slowik. Who is Bobby Slowik? How does he fit with the current staff in place? We're getting into all of that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. And if you're not an everydayer, welcome to the show. Nonetheless, we are getting into Bobby Slowik, the Dolphins' newest addition to the coaching staff. He has, per reports, been named as a senior pass game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins in the 2025 season. So we have really now had the dust settle for a lot of the speculative, questionable elements of this coaching staff, where Anthony Weaver was in the running for the New Orleans Saints job, who they couldn't get anybody that they wanted to take the job. Everybody kept withdrawing their names. So you kind of have this entire process play out, and Weaver's in the running, and then ultimately Kellen Moore takes that job. That was finalized yesterday. So Anthony Weaver will be back with the team as the defensive coordinator in 2025. And perhaps some of the question around Darrell Bevel as the Dolphins quarterbacks coach, who was the pass game coordinator, or is the pass game coordinator, was reportedly in the lead position for the Las Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator position, with Pete Carroll going back into coaching. And obviously they had a big time overlap together with Russell Wilson in their time in Seattle. And that didn't happen. And then it was announced that Bobby Slowik was joining the staff. And there was some speculation about, for a very short amount of time, what that means for Darrell Bevel. Well, the dust is settled, and Bevel's on the staff, and Slowik's on the staff, and Weaver's on the staff, and they've made a special teams coordinator hire. So we kind of know what we're working with from a coaching staff perspective. But how Bobby Slowik fits into this group is really interesting. Bobby Slowik, from a background perspective, he's one of the sons of Bob Slowik, who's a very accomplished NFL and CFL football coach. Bob Slowik was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos and the Green Bay Packers, the Cleveland Browns, and the Chicago Bears throughout the course of his career. He was first an NFL coach in 1992 as a defensive assistant, and then he was the defensive coordinator from 93 to 98, and then he was the Browns defensive coordinator in 99, and then he was with the Packers as their defensive backs coach for 4 seasons, and then he was the Packers defensive coordinator, and then he's the Broncos defensive backs coach, and then he was the Broncos defensive coordinator, and then he's in Washington from 2010 to 2013, and then he makes the switch, and he's been in the CFL ever since. But Bob Slowik, very well-respected defensive mind. One of his sons' name is Bobby. Another one of his sons' name is Ryan, who is already on the Dolphins coaching staff as of last season. So there's a couple of Slowiks on the coaching staff now for Miami. And Bobby started his coaching career with dad, right? As you know, family ties are a really big thing in the NFL and coaching. And he was a defensive assistant in Washington from 2011 to 2013. And then he went to San Francisco in 2017, and he was in San Francisco as a defensive quality control coach for 2 years, and then he was in San Francisco for 2 years as an offensive assistant, and he was offensive pass game specialist, and then he was offensive pass game coordinator, and then he was at Houston with DeMeco Ryans the last 2 years, and that's Bobby's path to here and now with the Dolphins. And Slowik, very well regarded as a potential head coaching candidate as recently as 12 months ago, coming off of his first season as a play caller, in which Houston, with a rookie quarterback and C.J. Stroud, They finished top 8 in a number of significant offensive statistics, including giveaways and net yards per attempt and passing yards. Those are well-represented metrics for Bobby Slowik's Houston Texans offense with C.J. Stroud as a rookie quarterback coming in year one. And that was obviously in part with Houston and their glow up as an organization. But a lot of elements of Houston offensively regressed in 2024, so much so that it ultimately prompted D'Amico Ryans to make a change with the offensive coordinator. That obviously puts Slowik in a position to be available as a 38-year-old coach to be on the market and be added to the mix for the Dolphins. A lot of the feedback from the Houston Texans beat, and this is one of those times where I am really thankful that I have the background that I do with Locked On NFL Scouting and keeping up with the trends across the league and understanding storylines, not just within the Dolphins and their bubble, but storylines across the entirety of the league and dynamics that are at play. This team had a lot of sloppy elements offensively. They struggled to run the ball at times. Now, they were better running the ball than they were in 2023, but they were worse passing the ball, and there were personnel alignment questions and route spacing questions and lots of the little details in year two. And, as a guy in his 30s that, had a very quick ascension and also spent a pretty good amount of time between his time in Washington and San Francisco. He spent time as a senior analyst with Pro Football Focus from 2014 to 2016. And then he gets back in with San Francisco in 2017, and he gets this taste of the defensive side of the football and the offensive side of the football, and then gets into offensive pass game specialization, and then he's an offensive coordinator. But Slowik's path was a rapid ascent. He's 37 years old. He'll be 38 this summer. Son of a longtime NFL defensive coach, brother of another NFL coach. These things can happen fast, and ascensions happen fast. And what happens when there's a regression is always a really fascinating thing to tell you about what a coach has. And, for Bobby Slowik in particular, the contributions, I think it will be murky what he's bringing to the table because Darrell Bevel will be back, and Frank Smith is still the offensive coordinator, and Mike McDaniel still presumably is going to be the play caller. But this is another really well-regarded mind whose unit seemed to struggle with getting the finer details right. And that's a commonality that seems to exist with Mike McDaniel and his experience as far as, the evolution of what his offenses look like as well. So the thought, in theory, and I don't know if it'll work or not, and I'm not going to say with any level of confidence or definitive confidence whether it will or not. But the thought is you're adding another sharp mind to this collaborative effort that is the aspiration of this iteration of the Dolphins to kind of get their own passing game coordination right. And Houston was an offense that, even amidst some wide receiver injuries, they had a lot more success pushing the ball vertically down the field despite bad pass protection this past year than really what the Dolphins did this year. So I think that is an element that I'm looking forward to seeing how those lines get overlapped and how it helps Miami's offense be a better version of itself in 2025. Now, there's significant connections to Miami. There's a story with C.J. Stroud and Bobby Slowik that I think will be really interesting to kind of dive into, that's come out since Slowik's been dismissed from Houston. We're getting into that some of that stuff next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip, or if you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay, whether you're backing a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. You never miss your chance for the action over at FanDuel. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you can get paid out instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot and $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So the story that came out about Slowik and Stroud was a pre-draft story. And it was shared on the radio by Lance Zierlein. And it was on ESPN 97.5. And the story went something along the lines of how when Stroud came in for his pre-draft visit with Houston, Stroud, they were going over concepts, and Stroud, I guess a number of times throughout the meeting, kind of came over the top and said, I got it. We called that concept this at Ohio State. And I guess after a couple of times, Bobby Slowik eventually stands up and says, I don't care what you call it at Ohio State. We're talking about professional football. And then Stroud got back up and gave it back to Bobby Slowik. So much so that apparently when Stroud went on his next visit with the team, they asked him how his previous visit went. And Stroud said horrible. And it was kind of an expectation that based off of that interaction, that there would be, it would not be a fit with Stroud in Houston. And then obviously they make the selection and draft CJ Stroud, and things go swimmingly in year one between really Stroud and the entire offensive staff, at least on the surface level, because of the successes that they had. And I'll say this, for a team that needs some teeth, I will appreciate a young coach who's willing to show some teeth with interactions. And I don't know necessarily how much of that story, without having been there firsthand and experiencing it, the exact tone of what the interaction was, but really the story is told by Lance Zierlein, who of course does great work with NFL draft profiles for NFL.com and has for a really long time. Was really, I guess, an interesting story about kind of how the pre-draft meeting set an expectation for a potential pairing with Houston and Stroud. And you're having an opportunity to take somebody who is willing to have some teeth. And I kind of like that. Now, you don't like the finer detail issues and route spacing issues and guys not attacking leverage properly, or where you're putting pieces before the snap in order to get out into an optimal distribution. These are all criticisms and critiques that existed with Houston. But I do think if you're going to call both sides of the coin with Bobby Slowik, I think one of the challenges is this is a team that really had catastrophic pass protection all throughout the course of the year. And that's despite the fact that they have Laramie Tunsil and they have some talent on the offensive line that was very highly drafted. And those players didn't take a leap. And some of it was also on CJ Stroud, who was sacked on 9% of his dropbacks. Stroud through 2 seasons is sacked on 8% of his dropbacks as a quarterback. And some of that's on CJ, and some of that's on the offensive line, and some of that's on the concepts and the scheme and people in eligibles being in the right place. And it makes it very difficult to kind of compartmentalize and divide everything. But you hear what 12, 10, 9 months ago, a lot of the players in Houston had to say about Bobby Slowik. They were very complimentary of the mind that he has for the game and how his brain works. And that being what is added, plus there being overlap with Mike McDaniel and Bobby Slowik in previous stops, and Ryan Slowik being on the coaching staff already as a defensive pass game specialist, with now Bobby Slowik coming in as an offensive senior pass game coordinator. You have a lot of comfort, but you also have another mind to try to hone everything in. It's a big chemistry experiment, and I wish I could say it's going to work, or I wish I would have confidence to say, no, this is a bad idea and it's not going to work. But you don't know. But Mike McDaniel, he overlapped in 2011 to 2013 with Bobby Slowik. Both of them were in Washington at the same time. And then obviously they overlapped in San Francisco, where Mike was the run game coordinator from 17 to 20, and then the offensive coordinator in 2021. Bobby Slowik, when Mike McDaniel became the offensive coordinator and Kyle Shanahan was still calling the plays, Bobby Slowik was the offensive pass game specialist. And he was an offensive assistant in San Francisco in 19 and 20. And then they also overlapped in 17 and 18 when Bobby was a coach on the defensive side of the ball. So you hear all the stories about the Kyle Shanahan tree and what the Athletic did the story about, like, it was McVay and Shanahan and McDaniel and Saleh and this whole group of like young coaches and how they were competitive with one another. And what I would hope, if you have a guy who has some teeth and you have a guy that's been an offensive coordinator that probably learned some hard lessons and had some personnel failings and had some own personal failings in Houston, he can use that and leverage that to be in the room with Frank Smith and Mike McDaniel and Darrell Bevel and all of the personalities that are a piece of the puzzle for Miami's offensive coaching staff. And you can breed some of that competitiveness in a new environment so that you can hopefully start to cultivate your own coaching tree. And the way that happens, obviously, with where Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins are at, it means you have a better season next year. You don't have the regression that you had in a lot of areas, and that includes the run game, but obviously that's not necessarily expected to be a contribution that Bobby Slowik is making with his title with the team. I mean, offense went from 1st to 15th in yards. They went from 4th to 16th in touchdowns. They went from 2nd to 22nd in net yards per attempt. This is all passing game stuff for the Dolphins this year versus 2023, the regression that Miami has experienced. So the title for Bobby Slowik, the speculation that was short-lived for Darrell Bevel and what it means, we're going to finish with all that here today on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player stat projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. This week, you can get in on Jason Tatum for more than 29 points. As just an example, the best part is Prize Picks. It's easy, quick. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean you can get your winnings in as little as 15 minutes. You can download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So this is where the assist to Marcel Louis-Jacques comes in. Of course, Marcel does outstanding work covering the Dolphins for ESPN. 14 hours ago, source confirms former Texans OC Bobby Slowik is joining the Dolphins staff as senior pass game coordinator. I'm told there are no changes to Darrell Bevel's title. He's been the Dolphins quarterback coach and pass game coordinator since 2022. So I don't know if some of this marriage, if you will, had been facilitated by the uncertainty that existed with Darrell Bevel, where maybe you were looking at having a vacancy in the quarterback room and having a vacancy in the pass game coordinator. I don't know if the title of senior pass game coordinator for Bobby Slowik is handed on as a means of how you get him in the building based off offers that he has from other places. That's not just an offensive assistant or a senior offensive assistant. Maybe he has position coach opportunities elsewhere. But what you do definitively have now is, Slowik has had a pass game focus for the better part now of what you go back to 2021 was when he made his first pass game specialist type of role. And now that time that's passed since you have um, a defined, I don't want to say niche, but focus for him. And then you contrast that to Mike McDaniel, whose initial background was as a run game coordinator. So now Mike has a focus in the run game. And Darrell Bevel, you go back to his upstart, his first position coach job as an NFL coach was as an assistant quarterbacks coach. And then he was a quarterbacks coach in Green Bay. So assistant quarterbacks coach and then quarterbacks coach for the first 6 years of his NFL career after getting started in Westmar and Iowa State and UConn. And then he's offensive coordinator all the way through Minnesota and Seattle and Detroit with a gap year in between, and then Jacksonville again. So his focus is quarterbacks. And then you contrast that with Frank Smith. And that's another different focus where he was a tight ends coach and an offensive line coach and another run game coordinator / offensive line coach with the Chargers in 2021. So that to me is, as you put all of the pieces of the puzzle together, how does Bobby Slowik fit with Darrell Bevel, fit with Frank Smith, with Mike McDaniel when McDaniel's expected to call plays still? Frank Smith's the OC. You have Slowik coming in as a senior pass game coordinator over top of Darrell Bevel, but Bevel's still the quarterback coach. I think all of their respective backgrounds give them different areas of influence and input into how they're going to craft game plans on a weekly basis. That's speculative on my part, but that's the best that I can come up with to try to read between the tea leaves and understand the why, other than just wanting to get another name on the coaching staff. As we said earlier, it is a big chemistry experiment. And I think the thing, if you're looking to, and nobody is these days right now, let's be completely honest, but if you're looking to lean into the optimistic view of why it would work, it's because McDaniel has the overlap and experience going back now 15 years with Bobby Slowik being on mutual coaching staffs. And their paths are very different. But it's one of the things for me that as I explore why it would work, why they're doing it, and then why it would not work, the argument for why it would not work would be to say, well, there's probably going to be there would be too many cooks in the kitchen, hypothetically. So do you choose to believe that until we have a proof of concept and see what it looks like? Do you choose to believe the familiarity and the specialization background of all these influences on the offense is going to complement one another to help you collectively collaborate on scheme and play design and personnel alignment and formational usage that give you the right answers to the test? I can't answer that for you, but I'm also not trying to give you your conclusion. I just want to present you with the information and let you do with it what you will and fan however it is that you choose to fan this offseason. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day here on Wednesday, February 12th. We will be back again tomorrow with more talk about your Miami Dolphins. Fins up. Hope to see you then.